you may be familiar with MET, which is muscle energy technique from some of your studies, but basically you're positioning the body in a position where you're trying to free off a restriction, activating the muscles, and works on that neurological principle that we talked about in motion testing, that you're giving feedback to the nervous system, which makes it informed about the state of tension of that muscle or joint or tissue, which then helps it to reset in a healthier state. Okay, so it works with agonist and antagonist and so forth. But you can study that by just picking up any book on MET. What I'm interested in showing you here is how you can modify it to make it effective on the problem areas of the body. So as a quick test, I could put a hand underneath the SI joint or the low back and just do a bit of springing. And if I do that in her, you can probably see her stomach move, you know, you can see how it moves. But when I get down here, it's stiff, it doesn't rebound through. And when I come under the sacrum, it feels like a rock. It's not doing much. So I can palpate all the way down and then even across to the SI joints. And then I can feel that from the other side. So her right one is stiffer. So I'm going to demonstrate how I can use the leg as a lever and use that concept of isometric clock exercises, which we'll explore a little later down the track, to create a change in the area I felt restriction. Another way I can check is I can use a bit of motion. Now her lumbars feel quite good from this perspective. The lumbar sacral is a bit stiff and the sacrum stiff, okay? And I can contact at any number of points, but I find the worst, most stiffest area, which is the lower part, middle to lower part of her right sacro-iliac joint. So I'll draw it on the board for you so you can see exactly what I'm trying to achieve. Here's your sacrum, okay? Triangular bone. Okay, there's the sacrum, and here's your little innominate bones, your PSISs. This is the right side. She's quite restricted through here. Okay, that's where I'm feeling the restriction. Now, there's no reason why I can't put my fingers over here, or even the opposite side. So we're not really looking at joints or muscles or any particular tissue. We're just finding the most dense, hard, stubborn spot. So basically it's in this region here, okay? So I need to contact the center of that point, because when I use MET, I'm basically concentrating all the forces through muscles and nerves and everything else on that point to create a change, okay? I'm activating an area which probably hasn't got any control, basically, and that's what you're trying to do with MET. Inform the nervous system to get to work in that area and start to function correctly. Okay, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to introduce the circular movement of the hip. Okay, so I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to move the hip up, contact that restricted part. I'm just bouncing back and forwards. I'm not just doing this with my other hand, I'm resisting so that I can feel the density. Okay, so I get that equal and opposite resistance happening. I find the worst spot. Then I do some circumduction, and I can pull back against the innominate if I want. Do some circumduction, and what happens is I'll get to a point where it starts to feel like it's activating under that tight spot, and often it gets a bit stiff and the movement is not as smooth, so it's probably somewhere in there. Okay, so if I go back to my diagram, I'll have to sort of go back and forth to illustrate this correctly. Let's say I'm moving the hip around and I get to a point here where it's stuck. It's the problem. It skips around the problem and keeps going. So there's the problem. If I'm not aware of that, okay, if I'm not aware of that exact point, the person I might not even do an effective technique. Okay, so basically I get to the point where I hit the problem, notice it starts to deviate, I back up to the ease side of the tension. I don't want to go too far into the restriction because that's like stepping off a healthy step into a broken step. I go back a step, then I repair the next step so that I can step onto it. Okay, that's the way to think about MET. If you go too far, you've locked it up and you're losing that control. It's like saying you can't inform the nervous system that it's out of control when you're starting from a place that's out of control. Okay, you have to start from where it has control. So I back up to that point. Then what I'm going to do, I'll draw it here. I'm going to get the system push basically in different directions of a clock. This is called the isometric clock exercise. Okay? So rather than me guessing which direction I have to push, which is what we normally do when we learn MET, we're taught that we either use a reciprocal inhibition or push one way, or isometric, post-isometric relaxation. But I would suggest to you that you don't have to decide which way to push. The body will tell us the answers if we ask the question. So for example, I might say push the body this way and it's strong. And I might say push that way and it's strong. And I might say push that way and it's weak. You push this way and it's a little bit weak, and then it's strong and it's strong and it's strong, and then it might be weak. Which means that the diagonal directions, in this case, I'm not sure what's going to happen on Rhonda, but in the example, means that she might not have good control in a diagonal direction, which means she's more predisposed to injury in that direction. So what we're doing here is we're tapping the nervous system on the shoulder and we're saying, do you realise you're not functioning that way? And it'll say, oh, thanks, I'm going to tighten that area up and contract. Okay? And we know we're in the right area because we will feel, once we activate the right direction, we feel it start to work on the tissues as if it's trying to rebuild the next step. So that's basically what happens. You don't have to guess. And the other thing is that you don't need a lot of contraction. We're not talking about a physiological bind, physiological barrier, or even an anatomical barrier. We're talking about that first point of if you want to use the term neurological bind, the first moment you feel anything happen, then you back up. So it's much more subtle, much more precise than often what's normally talked about. So let's see how it works on Rhonda. So I find the tight spot, which is around about S3-4, the right SI. If it were in the middle, I'd contact the middle. I circumduct the hip until I feel it goes from smooth to a bit unco. So back up to the smooth section. Now it's important for me not to lose control here, so I need to get my hand right around so I can control each direction on the clock. Okay? Then I'm going to get her to push against resistance very gently to 12 o'clock, so lift your knees slightly. Now when she does that, there's an interesting thing happens. I can actually feel the strong muscles take over and the weak muscles not happening, so I know from just doing that she doesn't want to go up and in. So now push up and out, sorry. There we go. And once I've got that contraction, I can feel her whole body activating. That's how I know I've got the right spot. Normally, and then relax. Normally with MET, it's suggested that you hold it for anywhere from 3 to 7 seconds, and that's because you need to give the system time to adapt. But with this method, it's either instantaneous or not. The nervous system, if it's already got control, will go, got it. As soon as you ask the question, the answer's right there. If the nervous system hasn't got control, it'll feel wonky or unco. So you need to hold it and find the right direction until the system's goes, I've got it, thanks, you can let go now. Get the idea? So you don't have to guess anything, the body tells you. I'll do a number of examples so you see what I mean. So make sure I find the right spot. If I lose it, I relocalize. Now push your leg straight towards me. Now she's a little bit weak in that direction, she has to struggle with it. Okay, she can probably feel that herself. So and then relax. And I can feel when she does that, it working right under my finger or slightly around. If I'm a little bit off, I can readjust. Okay. Now push down and out towards me. It's not the best there either, but it's not too bad. Relax. Now straight down towards the leg. Now people often take over here, so make sure they don't push too hard. It's not a competition. Relax. Pushing down and in. And relax. And straight in. She doesn't like that at all, that way. And in fact it goes a bit wobbly. If I get her to push slightly down as well, a bit more, slightly bit more, to about 5 o'clock. Now I feel all of her tissues engaging, and then relax. And I've just gone once around, and then I recheck. And just going once around, that movement is smoother. It's not perfect, but it's a lot smoother than it was before. And I could then find the tight spot again, recheck to make sure I'm right on the tight spot because it might be different now. Okay, and then do the same thing, and I could move all the way along the sacrum or the low back, wherever I want to work until it's nice and smooth. It's a really effective way to do that for the hip. If I wanted to add a little bit of internal and external rotation, I could contact, say, outside of the knee and inside of the ankle, and get her to push her leg in and knee out. that's adding some rotation. Or by swapping my contact, push the leg out and knee in. You get the idea? So you can play with the rotary element as well to concentrate the forces where you want them. Now it sounds a bit far-fetched, but I could actually treat a mid or upper thoracic from here as well, except I need a lot more flexion. It's not going to work in her because her lower body doesn't want to play along, just wants to flop there. Okay? But in some people, you can concentrate the forces, and when they activate, you can feel all the forces congregate basically wherever you want to put your attention. Okay? And you're positioning the body so that when the person contracts, only that spot can move. Okay? So that's one way to do the MET.